This program contains discussions of real-life crimes and may not be suitable for all audiences. When Darkness Falls is created for educational and awareness purposes, every effort has been made to ensure accuracy, and we tell these stories with deep respect for the victims, their families, and their communities. The goal is not to sensationalize, but to remember, to understand, and to learn. Two best friends, chasing waves, chasing adventures, and the freedom of the open road. Before we go deeper into what happened that night, I think it's important to pause here to remember who Dean and Adam really were as two young men who lived big, adventurous lives. Dean Lucas was the kind of guy who seemed like he was made for the ocean. Growing up in Western Australia, he was on a surfboard practically from the time he could walk. He had the talent to surf professionally, no doubt about it, but that wasn't what Dean was all about, or what he wanted. For him, surfing wasn't about trophies or sponsorships. It was about freedom. It was about joy, about being out there with nothing but the water, the sky, and the waves rolling under his board. Dean had the calm, steady persistence that grounded the people around him. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room. He was the one people trusted, the one who balanced out the chaos with thoughtfulness. In his friendship with Adam, Dean was the anchor, reliable, centered, and steady. But don't make that steadiness for lack of adventure. Dean loved to travel. Together with Adam, he explored the world: Iceland, South America, India, Canada. He wasn't reckless, though. He was the kind of traveler who could take on the wild places and still make people feel safe going along with him. In his personal life, Dean was deeply in love. His girlfriend, Josie, often said that he was adventurous but grounded. He could make her laugh in the smallest of moments and give her comfort in the biggest ones. Their relationship was more than romance. It was shared love, exploration of seeing the world together. Adam Coleman was different in the best way. If Dean was the steady hand, Adam was the spark. You couldn't miss him. His dreadlocks, his smile, his laugh. He had the magic kind of energy that drew people in. Strangers became friends within minutes of meeting him. Adam was adventurous to his core. Surfing was his heartbeat, yes, but he loved everything that came with it. The freedom, the travel, the late nights by the fire, the early mornings chasing waves. He thrived on new places, new experiences, and new people. He had the restless spirit that made life exciting, not just fun for him, but for everyone around him. Together with Dean, he surfed some of the wildest spots in the world: South Africa, Iceland, India, and while Dean was the one that was keeping them balanced, Adam, he wasn't careless. He just believed life was too short to play it safe. Mexico, especially close to Adam's heart, because it was where he met Andrea, the woman that he loved. She lived in Guadalajara, and part of his trip wasn't just about surfing. It was about reuniting with her, the love of his life, real love, deep and important to him. Before he left on the trip, he wrote her a note that simply said, "You are my world." Friends said Adam had a way of making people feel alive, just being around him. He carried his light, his joy, and his contagious energy. At 33, he had lived more life than most people do in a decade, and he did it all with laughter, love, and courage. For Dean Lucas and Adam Coleman, the road trip through Mexico in late 2015 wasn't supposed to be just another unforgettable adventure. It was the kind of trip you'd talk about for years afterwards. The one to tell your kids about, bring up every time you see a photo of a wave or smell the salt of the air. They had surfboards packed on top of the van, their route mapped out, and the best part waiting for them at the finish line, the loved ones. Dean's girlfriend, Josie, was waiting for him in London. Andrea was in course in Guadalajara. This wasn't just about surfing, though surfing was all a part of who they were. It wasn't about freedom, friendship. It was about coming home to the people they loved. Everything about that trip had the markings of another chapter in their story together. Two best friends who had spent their lives chasing the waves across the globe. Now, driving through Mexico, adding one more adventure to that collection, it was supposed to end with smiles and with hugs, and stories shared late into the night. But somewhere along the dark and lonely stretch highway in Sinaloa, things took a tragic turn. The road, already infamous for robbers and hijackings, became the place their journey was stolen from them. What began as a trip of lifetime ended in violence. A crime that still haunts not only Mexico, but also Australia and the tight-knit surfing community spread across the world. Dean Lucas and Adam Coleman weren't just the names of the headlines. The 33-year-old were best friends since childhood, bonded by the ocean, and loved for freedom. The two had finished the months of construction work in Canada. They saved up, bought a van, packed their boards, and hit the road. And this wasn't new territory for them. Their plan was simple. Head down to Mexico Pacific coast, surf along the way, and reconnect with the people they love. What can go wrong? Between Baja California and Guadalajara lay a stretch of road locals nicknamed the Highway of Death. On November 20th, 2015, they took the ferry across Gulf of California and landed in Topolobampo, Sinaloa, just before midnight. The ferry had been delayed, which meant if Adam wanted to make it to Andres by noon the next day, they had to drive all through the night. It was nearly 600 miles. Territories most locals won't touch after dark, but these two weren't naive. They spoke some Spanish, camped comfortably on the beaches, and had spent years in countries where travel wasn't always easy. Still, even seasoned travelers can't plan on everything. At 2:23 in the morning, a toll booth camera caught their van passing through La Brea. That was the last confirmed sighting of them alive. The next day, November 21st, Navalata, Sinaloa, a Chevy van was found torched on a rural road. Inside were two bodies, burned beyond recognition. At first, authorities didn't know who they were. Violence was sadly common in that area, so people assumed the victims were locals. Meanwhile, in Australia and Mexico, silence from Dean and Adam's phones sent their partners into panic. Josie hadn't heard from Dean. Andrea was waiting in Guadalajara, growing frantic. Both turned to Facebook, pleading for information. When photos of the burned van hit newspapers, a gas station attendant stepped forward. He remembered two foreigners stopping in, one with dreadlocks, the other clean cut. He recognized the van immediately. The grim reality set in. The victims were Dean and Adam. Adam and Dean's tragedy wasn't the first, and sadly, it's not probably going to be the last. Three young surfers from Australia and one from the United States, brothers Cullum and Jake Robenson, their friend Jack Carter Rhoad, also lost their lives in Mexico under eerie similar circumstances. Their story didn't grab intentional headlines the way some cases do. The echoes were pretty chilling. They were travelers, adventure spirits drawn to the beauty of Mexico, the warmth of its people, and the freedom of the open road. They chased experiences, sunsets, and stories to bring home. But just like Adam and Dean, their journey ended not in laughter or reunion, but violence. These weren't isolated incidents. They were different chapters of the same heartbreaking truth. Parts of Mexico are scarred by violence and corruption. The danger doesn't target everyone, but most visitors travel safety and bring home incredible memories. But for some, like Cullum, Jake, Adam and Dean, and Carter, fate put them in the wrong place at the wrong time. That stretch of highway through Sinaloa, where Dean and Adam vanished, is notorious. Locals know it, and journalists report on it. Travelers swap warnings about it. It's a corridor where danger doesn't hide. It lurks in the plain sight. Bandits have long used fake police lights to stop cars, pretending to be authorities before robbing people at gunpoint. Sometimes they take the money and the phones in the van and they leave the travelers shaken but alive. Other times, if they fight back, or even worse, they've seen the end is far worse than when they began. Visitors noted that the spot where the van was found, burned beyond recognition, was almost exactly where other attacks had been reported. Same stretch of road, same method, same eerie fingerprints of violence repeating themselves over and over. That's what makes their deaths even harder to process. These weren't two young men throwing themselves recklessly into danger. They weren't ignoring warnings or chasing trouble. They were just simply on the road following the map to Guadalajara, caught in a trap laid by people who saw opportunity in the shadows. What happened to Cullum and Jake and Carter is what happened to Dean and Adam. Risks that can turn a dream trip into a nightmare in just a blink of an eye. Authorities eventually announced arrests.
There's been a breakthrough in the suspected murders of WA surfers Dean Lucas and Adam Coleman in Mexico. 3 men have been arrested. Authorities are claiming the suspects shot the tourists after a highway robbery went wrong.
A week after Dean Lucas and Adam Coleman's burnt-out Chevy van was found on a lonely stretch of road in Navolato, Mexico, finally a breakthrough. Police investigating the suspected murders of the Golden Bay men, arresting 3 members of a notorious gang. The suspects told authorities they'd posed as police, pulling 2 tourists over and ordering them into another vehicle. They confessed to shooting a long-haired man in the face when he resisted. The state attorney telling reporters the gang then shot the second man and drove the van to another location, setting it alight, the bodies still inside. Ballistics tests linking the firearm found on one of the suspects to the murder victims, who are still yet to be formally identified as Adam and Dean. The region where the 33-year-old men vanished is one of the most dangerous in the world, home to the notorious Sinaloa cartel.
Familiares de 2 turistas australianos que realizaban.
Despite that, the crime has made local headlines. Authorities making this case and the hunt for the 2 remaining suspects a priority, amid fears the publicity will damage tourism. Dean and Adam, mates for 17 years, were on the surfing trip of a lifetime. They were last seen in Topolobampo chasing waves as they travelled to meet up with Adam's girlfriend in the city of Guadalajara, but they never arrived. Now their families are in Mexico to bring their boys home, while their girlfriends are determined to finish their surfing trip for them, posting this touching tribute. Off to ride some waves for the first time. Tegan Sapwell, 9 News.
3 men taken into custody and warrants issued for 2 more. Officials were quickly to clarify these weren't cartel bosses or notorious drug lords, just low-level criminals from the area. Now, according to the prosecutors, the suspects admitted they had been driving around in a vehicle outfitted with fake police lights, pulling people over and robbing them. The official story went like this. Dean and Adam were stopped along the dark stretch of highway. When men realized the 2 Australians were going to hand things over quietly, one of the suspects pulled a gun. Both Adam and Dean were shot during the attempted robbery. From there, panic set in. To cover their tracks, the group allegedly doused the van in fuel and set afire with both men inside. But from the beginning, their families had questioned that. Some believe those confessions were coerced, that the suspect said that told what the investigators wanted to hear. Others pointed out inconsistencies in the timeline or the details that didn't add up. Wondered if maybe these weren't just small-time criminals at all, but part of something even bigger, a machine corruption that didn't want the whole truth to come out. Whether the full story ever really came to light, that remains unclear. And for their families, that uncertainty is a wound that never quite closes. Because when you lose somebody, answers matter, and the answers you've been given doesn't feel solid. Grief is tangled up in the frustration, suspicion, and then doubt. What is certain, though, is Dean and Adam didn't survive that night. 2 young men full of life, full of fire, love, and adventure were taken in the most brutal way. The ripple effect spread far beyond the highway in Mexico. When the news of their death broke, it hit global surfing community like a wave. In Australia, friends and fellow surfers organized paddle-out ceremonies, one of the most sacred rituals in surfing culture. Dozens of people paddled their boats beyond the breakers, forming circles out to sea. Then they tossed flowers into the waves, bowed their heads, and let the ocean carry their grief. For Dean and Adam, who had lived so much their lives in the water, it was the perfect tribute. Those ceremonies weren't just held in one place either. Across beaches in Australia and beyond, people honored them the same way. Surfers gather shoulder to shoulder, raising their arms in the air and letting the sea take the flowers, the tears, and the memories of the two friends who should still be here. Dean and Adam's story wasn't about how their lives ended. It became a reminder to surfers, travelers, and dreamers everywhere that life is fragile and take caution. The joy can be stolen in an instant. Both families flew to Mexico, supported the donations by the strangers. They thanked the surfing community for their love poured out. Friends summed it up best. Adam and Dean weren't just tourists. They were travelers. They lived more in 33 years than many do in a lifetime. The death of Dean and Adam weren't just isolated tragedies. They are part of a much bigger storm. Mexico's ongoing drug war for years now, the conflict that claimed 10,000s of lives, families torn apart. And while tourists usually aren't the direct targets, sometimes the violence does spill over, catching innocent people in its path. And there's one thing Josie shared that says a lot about Dean and who he was. He told her, "If I die before you do, sprinkle me over the good waves." That wasn't him being dark. That was just Dean. For him, the ocean was his home, and he wanted to be part of it forever. After death, Josie honored his wish. She carried his ashes across the world of the oceans, from Hawaii to South America to even Mexico, making sure Dean catches one last wave everywhere that he loved. Just at 33, Dean had already lived a life that was rich with love, friendships, and adventures and family. His story is not just about how it ended, but about how beautifully and how treasured he lived his life while it was here. When the news of Adam's death spread, Andrea said she still felt him with her. His presence, his love, and his kindness. It didn't disappear with him. And his friends, they said Adam was unforgettable, not just because of how his life ended, but because of how brightly he lived it. Adam's legacy is one of brightness, courage, and lots of love. He showed people how to live wide open, how to chase joy, how to embrace every moment of your life, and how to love fully. For their families, the hardest part is knowing how close they were to the life they wanted. Their story is now forever woven into the fabric of Mexico's wider violence. Their story is a reminder of how fragile life is and how important it is to cherish every moment with the people who you love. And if you'd like to dive deeper into the story of Cullum and Jake and their friend Jack Carter Rhoad, we've covered that case in detail as well. It's another heartbreaking journey that echoes so much like what happened to Dean and Adam. You can find that video right here on our channel, When Darkness Falls. And if you'd like to see more crime cases covered with care and respect, don't forget to subscribe to When Darkness Falls. We do care. The next case is calling us. Until next time, bye for now.